They have stood in silence for nearly 1,000 years, 70 stone giants scattered across the sweltering lowlands of Mexico. When I was deciding to make for the very first video on this channel, I know I want to start right here with the Olmec Colossal Heads, because for decades we thought we understood them, but recently researchers started pointing sub-millimeter 3D laser scanners at these 50-ton monuments. That goal was just preserve them. But the data that came revealed something entirely unexpected. Surface details invisible to the naked eye that completely challenged how we thought these were made. I started this channel because I believe we constantly underestimate our ancestors. In the age of the Ethernet, it is so easy to look to an ancient masterpiece and say that's impossible, it must have been aliens or lost advanced technology. But I think the truth is so much more fascinating. This is the story about human ingenuity, patience, and absolute mastery. Let's look closer.
To appreciate what the Olmec achieved, we must first understand the challenge they set for themselves. The Olmec civilization emerged roughly 3,500 years ago along Mexico's Gulf Coast. Archaeologists often call them the mother culture of Mesoamerica, a society that flourished centuries before the Maya or the Aztec. They had no horses or oxen. Their tools were made of stone, wood, and plant fiber. Yet, they quarried blocks of volcanic basalt, one of the hardest stones on Earth, weighing up to 50 tons. They moved these massive boulders across 80 to 150 kilometers of jungle, swamp, and river. Archaeologist Ann Cyphers, who has led excavations at San Lorenzo for decades, believes they likely used a combination of wooden sledges, log rollers, and seasonal flooding, rafting the stones along swollen rivers during the wet season. It was an enormous undertaking, requiring hundreds of laborers, careful planning, and deep knowledge of the land. But this was just the transport. The carving itself presented an entirely different challenge. Basalt doesn't cooperate, it's dense, brittle, and prone to fracturing under direct blows. Carving it with stone hammers requires patience measured in months, possibly years. And yet look at the result. The symmetry of the features, the smooth finish of the cheeks, the subtle contours around the eyes. Each head is unique. These aren't abstract symbols, they're portraits. Individuals with specific faces, expressions, and elaborate headdresses. For decades, the prevailing assumption was that this level of refinement required brute force and endless labor, impressive but crude. The 3D scans suggest something more sophisticated. Over the past decade, preservation efforts have brought modern imaging technology to Mesoamerican monuments. Teams from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, INAH, along with international collaborators, have begun creating high-resolution 3D models of the colossal heads. The primary purpose is conservation. Acid rain, humidity, and biological growth are slowly eroding these monuments. A detailed digital record ensures that even if the physical stone degrades, the information survives. But these scans capture detail at a resolution the human eye can't perceive, surface variations measured in fractions of a millimeter. And when researchers began analyzing this data, they noticed something unexpected. The tool marks the finishing patterns, the geometry. They tell a story about how these sculptures were made, and it's more complex than simple hammering. One of the first patterns to emerge was on the smooth surfaces of the face and headdress. Microstriations, tiny parallel lines remarkably uniform in spacing. When you strike stone with a hammer or chisel, the resulting marks are chaotic, irregular chips, and gouges radiating from the point of impact. These striations are different. They are consistent, directional, and shallow. Experimental archaeology offers an explanation. Researchers like those at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History have demonstrated that ancient craftspeople often used abrasive techniques, rubbing the stone with harder materials like sand or powdered stone mixed with water, applied with wooden or leather tools. This grinding process, performed patiently over weeks or months, can produce exactly the kind of uniform striations seen in the scans. It's not evidence of machines, it's evidence of method. A systematic, refined technique passed down through generations of master carvers. The scans revealed something else: precision. On several heads, the bilateral symmetry, the match between the left and right sides of the face, is remarkably exact, In some cases, deviation is measured in just a few millimeters across features spanning half a meter or more. How did they achieve this without modern measuring tools? Archaeologist Susan Gillespie has noted that Olmec artisans likely used cord, plumb bobs, and templates, simple tools that in skilled hands allow for precise replication of form. We see similar techniques in other ancient cultures, from Egypt to China. The symmetry isn't impossible, it's intentional. These weren't workers rushing through a commission, they were masters taking their time. The scans have answered some questions. They've confirmed the sophistication of Olmec technique. They've mapped the erosion patterns threatening these monuments. But they've also deepened some mysteries that archaeology has yet to solve. Why were so many of these heads buried? At San Lorenzo, heads were found deliberately interred, some placed in pits, others covered with colored clay and sand. A few show signs of intentional mutilation before burial. Some scholars believe this was a form of ritual decommissioning. Perhaps when a ruler died, his monument was ceremonially killed and buried. Others suggest that burials may have been protected, hiding sacred objects from invaders or during times of conflict. The scans can tell us how they were buried, the orientation, the depth, the materials used to cover them, but they can't tell us why. That answer, if it exists, lies in understanding Olmec belief systems, a subject where our knowledge remains fragmentary. Then there's the question of identity. Who were these people? The prevailing theory is that they represent rulers, powerful kings or chiefs, whose images were carved in stone to project authority. The individualized features support this. These are specific people, not generic gods or symbols. But we don't know their names. We can't read their stories. The Olmec left no deciphered writing system, no king lists, no historical records that we can understand. The heads stare at us with specific faces, and we cannot call them by name. There are also geological puzzles. Some researchers have noted that certain heads feature bands of hematite, an iron-rich mineral concentrated in specific areas, particularly across the forehead. Whether this was deliberate selection or coincidence remains debated. The Olmec clearly chose their boulders carefully, but we don't know all the criteria they used. What the scans make clear is that every stage of the process, selection, transport, carving, finishing, placement, was intentional. These weren't random acts of labor. They were executed according to a plan we're only beginning to reconstruct. In the age of viral content, there's a temptation to frame ancient achievements as impossible, to suggest that our ancestors couldn't have accomplished great things without help from lost technologies or outside forces. But this impulse sells our ancestors short. The Olmec didn't need lasers or forgotten machines. They had something equally powerful: time, skill, organization, and cultural motivation that we can barely imagine. A master carver, working with patience and proven techniques, can produce work that astonishes the modern eye. Give that carver a community of support, food, shelter, purpose, and the generations of knowledge accumulated by predecessors, and the results speak for themselves. The real mystery isn't how they did it. The 3D scans are helping us reconstruct that story. Abrasive grinding, systematic shaping, careful finishing. The real mystery is who these people were. What did they believe? Why did these specific faces matter so much that communities invested years of labor to immortalize them in stone? The scans give us new tools to ask these questions. They let us see details invisible to the naked eye. They let us share these monuments with researchers around the world, democratizing access to data that was once limited to those who could travel to Mexico.
We set out to preserve the Colossal Heads, to create digital backups of monuments threatened by time, and whether, in doing so, we gained something unexpected, a new appreciation for the people who made them. The Olmec Heads are not a puzzle to be solved with theories of lost technology. They are achievements to be studied with humility. 3,000 years ago, in the swamps of Mesoamerica, people with stone tools and boundless determination carved portraits of their leaders into volcanic rock. We don't know their names, we can't read their language, but we can look at their work closer than ever before and recognize the unmistakable signature of a human mystery. The stone giants aren't hiding impossible secrets, they are showing us what's possible.